Ever felt like your computer's just giving up? Like it's decided to take a permanent coffee break right in the middle of your crucial accounting tasks? You're staring at that spinning wheel. The clock is ticking, your deadlines are looming, and all you can think is, why is QuickBooks so slow? Well, let me ask you a more direct question. How much RAM do you really need for QuickBooks? Not what the minimum specs say, but what you actually need to keep your sanity and your business running smoothly. See, we've all been there. You start with the basics. You load QuickBooks, maybe a few other programs, and everything seems fine. Then your business grows. You're handling more transactions, more customers, more inventory. You're generating complex reports, running multiple instances of QuickBooks, or maybe you're even using add-ons. Suddenly, your computer feels like it's wading through molasses. You're losing precious time, and frankly, it's driving you nuts. The truth is, understanding RAM, or random access memory, is crucial for anyone using QuickBooks, especially if you're serious about your business. It's not just about meeting the minimum requirements. It's about optimizing your system for efficiency and preventing those frustrating slowdowns that can derail your entire workflow. Let's break it down. What is RAM? Anyway, think of it as your computer's short-term memory. It's where your computer stores data that it's actively using. When you open QuickBooks or any other program, the necessary data is loaded into RAM. The more RAM you have, the more data your computer can access quickly, without having to rely on the much slower hard drive or SSD. QuickBooks, in particular, can be a resource-intensive program, especially with larger company files or when running multiple tasks simultaneously. Every transaction, every report, every customer record, it all takes up RAM. And if you don't have enough, your computer starts to swap data between RAM and your storage drive, which is a process known as paging or swapping. This is what causes those dreaded slowdowns and freezes. Now, let's talk about the minimum requirements. Intuit, the makers of QuickBooks, typically recommends a minimum of 4 GB of RAM for their software. But here's the kicker. That's just the absolute bare minimum. It's like saying you can survive on a single slice of bread a day. Technically true, but hardly ideal. In real-world scenarios, especially for businesses with moderate to heavy usage, 8 GB of RAM is the absolute starting point. This allows QuickBooks to run smoothly, even with a few other programs open. If you're dealing with larger company files, or if you frequently run complex reports, you'll want to consider 16 GB of RAM. And if you're running multiple instances of QuickBooks using add-ons, or if you're dealing with very large company files, 32 GB of RAM might even be necessary. For power users, accountants, or anyone who relies heavily on QuickBooks for their day-to-day operations, this provides a significant performance boost. So, how do you determine how much RAM you actually need? Well, it's not just about the size of your company file. It's also about your usage patterns. Are you running other programs alongside QuickBooks? Maybe you're using a web browser with multiple tabs open, or perhaps you're using other accounting software or design programs. Each of these programs consumes RAM, and if you don't have enough, your system will struggle. Consider your operating system as well. Windows 10 and 11, for example, require a certain amount of RAM just to run smoothly. So, even before you open QuickBooks, your system is already using a portion of your available RAM. Think about your future needs. Are you planning to expand your business? Are you anticipating an increase in transactions or customers? If so, it's wise to invest in more RAM now, rather than having to upgrade later. Let's go through some practical scenarios. Scenario 1. Small business with basic usage. You're a sole proprietor or a small business owner with a relatively small company file. You primarily use QuickBooks for invoicing, basic reporting, and tracking expenses. In this case, 8 GB of RAM should be sufficient. Scenario 2. Medium-sized business with moderate usage. You're handling a larger volume of transactions, managing inventory, and running more complex reports. You also use other programs alongside QuickBooks, such as a web browser, email client, and maybe some basic office software. In this case, 16 GB of RAM is recommended. Scenario 3. Large business or power user. You're running multiple instances of QuickBooks using add-ons and dealing with very large company files. You also use resource-intensive programs like design software or video editing software. In this case, 32 gigabytes of RAM or more might be necessary. Now, let's talk about how to check your current RAM usage. In Windows, you can open the Task Manager by pressing Ctrl plus Shift plus Escape. Go to the Performance tab, and you'll see a graph showing your memory usage. This will give you an idea of how much RAM your system is currently using. You can also monitor your RAM usage while running QuickBooks. Open the Task Manager and observe the memory usage graph as you perform various tasks within QuickBooks. This will give you a better understanding of how much RAM QuickBooks is consuming. If you find that your RAM usage is consistently high, it's a clear indication that you need to upgrade. Upgrading RAM is generally a relatively simple and cost-effective way to improve your computer's performance. When choosing RAM, make sure it's compatible with your motherboard. Check your motherboard specifications to determine the type of RAM it supports, DDR3, DDR4, or DDR5, the maximum amount of RAM it can handle, and the speed of RAM it supports. Also, consider purchasing RAM in pairs or sets to take advantage of dual-channel or quad-channel memory configurations, which can improve performance. Beyond RAM, other factors can also affect QuickBooks performance. Consider upgrading your storage drive to an SSD, solid-state drive. SSDs are significantly faster than traditional hard drives, which can improve overall system performance, including QuickBooks loading times. Make sure your operating system and QuickBooks are up to date. Software updates often include performance improvements and bug fixes. Close unnecessary programs and browser tabs. The fewer programs running in the background, the more RAM will be available for QuickBooks. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.